and provide feedback. To tell different stakeholders, you gave us your submissions. This is the product that has come out of the process. And so we had meetings, dissemination meetings with the House of Chiefs. The picture you can see on the right is a meeting that we had with the House of Chiefs in Lusaka, Rufanyama district on the Copper Belt of Zambia. We had another meeting with chiefs in the Southern Province. We had meetings with districts and other stakeholders providing feedback.
Hi, Mr. Msole, we can't hear you. Hello, Mr. Msole, are you still there? Okay, we seem to have lost him. Let me just work to get him right back in. But just a reminder as he logs back in, that you are invited to introduce yourself in the chat box and to drop your questions and comments in the Q&A. Would love to hear your submissions. Zambia Land Alliance, one of their purposes with this webinar is to collect submissions and views on these upcoming amendments. So please do already start thinking around, what your contribution or submissions are to this amendment process. And like I mentioned before, later on during this session, we will also give you a chance to speak. We will unmute you and give you a chance to speak. It would be good to also hear. I can see that there's people from different countries joining us here. Please do also share your views, experiences around this topic. Land administration in the different parts of the region are not so very different, and the challenges that are faced by vulnerable or excluded communities are not very different. So your submissions and your contributions would still be very valuable, and it's good to always have to see from other countries or to hear from other people, how has it been done in your country, how has it been done, and if you're in Zambia, what is it that you think or you feel should be included in this amendment process. Okay, it looks like Mr. Msole is just joining back in now. I will give him just maybe a minute or two to reshare his screen. Mr. Msole, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Apologies, my network is bad where I am.
No,
Yeah,
that's
so I
well
was
understood.
just saying that,
Yes, please proceed.
yeah, so I think I was on a slide where I was talking about, can I, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We identified the Lands Act as a key legislation, and so we proactively started to analyze it and in readiness for the amendment process. So we held meetings with the civil society organizations to analyze the provisions of the act and to see the gaps which we would recommend for engagement. We also had the district stakeholders to discuss the same. So apart from that, Zambia Land Alliance also um, organized, or we mobilized the chiefs from the central province. And during the meeting with the House of Chiefs, they refused to discuss the amendment of the Lands Act because they felt that the number of chiefs, 50, was too small to make those discussions. So they recommended that government needed to take those discussions to provincial chiefs councils. So at Zambia Land Alliance, we and Northwestern Province. So we had a bit of resources, and we decided to use those resources to organize hard with chiefs from Central Province, basically receiving their inputs, asking them, what do you want to see in the Lands Act? What do you want to from the Central Province? Then we also, the government and union is conducting consultations through the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. So Zambia Land Alliance has participated in those consultations
Hi,
that
Mr.
happened
Msole.
in Kavu.
Oh, okay. Looks like we lost him again. Apologies for that. You know, in these parts, these are the same challenges that we're talking about. Um, I'll work to get them back in, so that we don't miss the important points being put across and the discussion being used. Perhaps what I will do is I will share the presentation on my side, seeing as the network is a bit more stable, and I will advise him to just join with his audio only. So I will ask your indulgence for 2 minutes just to do that. But please do start already giving your thoughts around this topic in the chat box and in the Q&A. Thanks. Okay, I'm resharing the screen on behalf of Mr. Msole as we wait for him to come in, but we are joined by his colleagues. Bridget, could I ask you to please step forward as I share the screen and just allow you to speak on the presentation as we wait for Mr. Msole to come back in. Please also just confirm that you're able to see the screen.
Yes, I'm able to see the screen.
Okay,
Hello?
awesome.
Join the link in
Yes.
the presentation. I go into registering again. All right. So I think Ms. Samsola was just speaking to the efforts that ZLA has been undertaking, which includes consulting the CSOs as well as the chiefs. I think the pictures that are being shown are for about, I think, 27 chiefs that were consulted on the Lands Act in March. That's only for Central Province. So I should mention that we have over, I think, 280 chiefs, but we could only afford to consult about 27 due to funding. But we managed to get very comprehensive submissions from the chiefs, and we will actually submit those as well to the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. Maybe we can go to the next slide. All right. So the Ministry of Lands has also been undertaking provincial consultations with different stakeholders, including government departments, CSOs, as well as just the general community. So we also did participate in some of the consultations, I think about three, which is for Central Province, Eastern, as well as Copper Belt Province, where we made submissions on the Lands Act amendments, which include obviously the things that Jacinta will highlight in her presentation. So I think one of the challenges that we've had with the advocacy efforts with the Ministry of Lands was because many of these technocrats and do not really understand the challenges that the rural communities are facing. So the representation of the CSOs are very minimal. So we have had that challenge, but we managed to harness as much information through our engagement with the ministry. All right. So some of the recommendations that have been highlighted include the reduced tenure period from 99 years to 50 years. I think these are recommendations that are coming in from the stakeholders. So there is a call to reduce the tenure period from 99 years to 50 years for non-Zambians. Depending on the purpose and the use of the land. And I think Mr. Msole had mentioned the reason why some of these changes are being recommended, which include the type of investment that is being undertaken that may not require as much as 99 years for a non-Zambian. Then we also had submissions where they're requesting that if the lease expires, the land should be converted to customary tenure. Currently, our Lands Act only allows for the conversion of customary land to statutory land. But in that recommendation, there's a proposal that when the lease ends, there's a need for a reversal where the land goes back to customary tenure, where obviously much of the investments are happening right now, and we've seen a lot of conversion from customary to statutory land. Then we also had a recommendation where there are people that are seeking that there should be written informed consent of at least 60% of the male or 40% of the female adult members of the family before entering into any land transaction. I think this is mainly to enhance the issue of consultation, because much of the provisions right now only talk about consultation. So we've tried to move a way forward to strengthen the voice of the landholders by ensuring that there is written informed consent from the landholders themselves. And I know that there is an issue of the 60% of the male. I think one of the reasons, obviously, is because much of the land in Zambia is held by the male folk. So the representation is a bit higher, but I think that we have almost 50% women actually voicing out is actually going to make sure that the interest of women is also considered during the consent processes. All right. Mm. All right. Then obviously we're also requesting that the president must consult the chiefs when he's about to allocate land to anybody, even for investment. There is a consultation right now that is happening, but we've had some chiefs who have said that the government have actually allocated some land to investment without actually consulting them. So some have claimed that they only receive a letter from the Ministry, maybe of Lands, for them to allocate a large portion of land for them to use for uh, land investment. So the recommendation is obviously there should be consultation, no matter how minimal it is that the chief is involved. Yeah, then there's also the issue of alienation of land to investors, which they recommend obviously that it should continue, but the investment value should be raised from the current 500,000 US dollars to about 2 million US dollars. Then there's also an enactment of a customary land law. So the country does not have a customary land law. And right now we have the government that have set up a technical working group that is looking into developing these customary land guidelines. Because what is happening is that in the Lands Act, the provisions that speak to customary land administrations are very minimal. So there's been a request that we make a more comprehensive approach to customary land administration, obviously because it's unwritten and it's subject to manipulation. But if we have this law that will be put in place, it means that the traditional leaders will be guided on how they can actually administer land. Then customary land certification, I think we can't overemphasize this need that these certificates will actually help to improve the land tenure security of customary landholders. So these are being requested that they should be legally recognized and standardized in the chiefdoms. There's some chiefdoms that are giving out some form of documentation, but they're not legally recognized. So the call for customary land tenure is that they should be recognized so that in any case, they stand at par with the title deeds whenever maybe there's a land dispute or there's a compensation process that needs to be considered. Then there's also a submission that obviously traditional authorities should not alienate land to non-Zambians. The reasons may be obviously that probably they might not know the jurisdictions of the land administration processes that the non-Zambians are asking for land. And I think that there are other stakeholders such as government who might do a proper vetting process for non-Zambians. But I'm sure traditional authority may not even know what kind of fake documentation can come through from the non-Zambians. But I think if the process comes in from maybe the government authorities, they'll more likely be able to ensure that the non-Zambian who's benefiting is the rightful person to have the land. Then there's also a request that in case of land displacement, affected people should be compensated with the benefits accrued from the land. So I think most times the compensation is only being done on the development that is on the land. And some people, obviously, because, land should have value. So if you're only compensating the development, it means that the value of the land itself is not being considered. So uh, the issue is that these displacement cases have had a lot of people that have been affected, but they have been given inadequate compensation because the value of land is not considered during the compensation process. All right. Okay. I think that ends our presentation, and I can see Mr. Msole is now in the meeting, and he can take it up from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Mr. Msole, and sorry about your connection, but I think Bridget did really well stepping in and just completing the rest of your presentation. And while you were away, you're just in time for a question directed to you from Zoro Rai. His question is, he says he understands that Zambia is on the drive of legal reform. What are the new proposals on how to deal with the situation where minerals are discovered on the land owned by locals? How do you intend to deal with that? Because the issue of mineral resources has been a source of illegal displacements and flagrant violation of human rights for local people in Africa. Mr. Msole, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did. It was loud and clear. Apologies again for, I've had to drive away from where I was to a different place where I'm able to join. Apologies for that. That's a big challenge that we have, and it's a challenge of the law that we currently have. Zambia, like I think most African countries, are still grappling with the imperialist laws that we inherited. The law which creates that situation is that we have a Minerals and Mining Mines and Minerals Development Act, which actually provides
Uh-oh, I hope we're not losing him again. Okay, maybe what we can do is go into the second presentation, and then we'll be sure to come back to these questions. I can see there's another question from Dr. Samuel there in the Q&A box. So we will attend to these questions. Just so we don't lose track of time, I will invite Jacinta to make her presentation, and then later on we will just take all the questions together once Mr. Msole is back in. Jacinta, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Welcome to my presentation. I've been introduced already. I'm Jacinta Kunda, and representing Zambia Land Alliance, as well as the National Land Coalition, which is a platform for different institutions acting on land. So I'll turn off my video because of network challenges. Let me just share my presentation.
I was saying that as long as
okay, so
have
I
the
can
law,
hear
I
Mr.
don't know
Msole
where
is
you
coming through.
stopped hearing me from.
Sorry for now. Okay, thank you so much for proceed. I'm going to talk about the Lands Act of 1995, Cap 184 of the laws of Zambia, just to share some of the details in the law which is under review. So in order for me to do that, I'm first of all going to look at what is provided for in the Constitution of Zambia, Amendment 2 of 2016, so that we look at the basis and the guideline for land policy, then get into the Lands Act of 1995. I'm going to look at some of the provisions, and then look at the impact, not really the recommendation. I think I'm sharing wrong document here. Let me get the correct document. Or Emanuela, help us to
Yeah,
use
Jacinta, perhaps I
to
can
share the
share
document that I
from,
sent.
yeah, I can share
Whoever will
from my
be,
end.
if you do it first, then we can go by what you share.
Yes, I think let me share from my end. It might help also with
Let me
your
see.
network.
Yes, just share from that end.
Okay.
Okay, so you can go from the start. So like I mentioned, I'm going to look at the Constitution, the principles on land policy, and then get into the Act itself, and then look at the impact of the Act, the current Act that we have in its form, and how it has impacted on the land rights and the land administration in the country. Can you go on the next slide? Emanuela, can we go to the next slide, please? The next one. Thank you so much. So we're going to look at the Constitution of Zambia, Amendment 2 of 2016. And we are looking at part 253. Go on the previous slide.
Hi, Jessica.
Okay.
I think it's moving a little slower on your end.
Okay, that is the slide that we are starting with.
All right.
So these are some of yes. We're going to look at the principles of land policy so that we set base, because the Constitution has set the tone for the land policy, meaning that the laws that are going to be adopted should have the basis of what is provided for in the law, the Constitution, which is the main provisions, which are the principles, which include equitable access to land and associated resources, the security of tenure for lawful landholders, a recognition of indigenous cultural rights, sustainable land use, transparent, effective and efficient administration of land, effective and efficient settlement of land disputes. The next slide, please. So I'm just running through what is provided for in the Constitution. The next slide, please. There's also a provision that river frontages, island, lake shores, and ecologically and culturally sensitive areas to be accessible to the public, not to be used for conservation and preservation activities. So we are looking at what is provided for in the Constitution, but I'm sure as those that are within Zambia, institutions in Zambia and CSOs, you need to start thinking and relating what is provided for in the law and what is happening. You've got a directive that these frontages, islands, and lake shores should not be leased, fenced, or sold, and they should be accessible to the public, but exactly what is on the ground is totally different. There is also a provision on investment in land to also benefit local communities and their economy. But Bridget is just from presenting on issues of displacement and compensation, where we have so many investment in the country, but the only the only positive that goes to the affected people, I don't know if it's positive, it depends to what extent, is about compensation. But the Constitution says that it should benefit the local community. We're not talking about the revenues that come from, then it's distributed in different stakeholders, different sectors, but the provision is that investment in land to also benefit the local communities, meaning that the host communities and maybe the next level should be the district. So there is this provision in the Constitution, which I don't think is being adhered to. There is also a principle that plans for land use to be done in a consultative and participatory manner. Of course, we've seen efforts by the government to ensure that there is there are plans that are being developed, especially at district level, where we have integrated development plans that are being developed in different districts. But in terms of consultation, the level of consultation is not adhered to, because we have a lot of concerns which have been raised at community level, going to chiefdom level, as well as at district level, where stakeholders have been complaining that they are not being are consulted when decisions and actions are being made on land. The next slide. The other principle in the Constitution talks about classification and alienation of land and land tenure. So land shall be delimited and classified as state land, customary land, and such other classification as prescribed. So Mr. Msole earlier on pointed out that we have a dual tenure system, and that is state and customary land. But what the challenge that comes in there, or the gap that is there, is that for state land, we have a law in place, which is the Lands Act of 1995. Of course, we've got some provisions on customary land. However, that the gap that that still exists up to now is insecurities under customary land. But of course, the recognition of customary land is in the Constitution. So as we go further in terms of discussing this, we need to base our discussion and also our submission on how we can ensure that our customary land is legally recognized, because the Constitution recognizes that they should be state and customary land. But priority looks like it's been given to state land. And then the other principle is that the president may, through the Lands Commission, alienate land to citizens and non-citizens as prescribed. So this is also provided for in the act which we're going to look at, where in Zambia, the land can be alienated to Zambians and non-Zambians. And then the last principle on land is that land shall be held for a prescribed tenure, meaning that there is a period for when a person or an institution can hold land. After that, it should return back to the owners. So we get into the nitty-gritties or the details of the Lands Act of 1995. So we're just trying to set a tone to see what is provided for in the Constitution. So when we get into the Lands Act, there are a lot of provisions there. And if you look at the act itself, you're going to get all the details. But for the introduction, of course, the Lands Act of 1995 is the principal law on land. And then this act has been in existence for 30 years. So it's a very old act. If it was a human being this time around, I'm sure they would have gone through university, and they would have had 5 children already. We go on the next slide. So on the objectives of the act, the first one is to provide for the continuation of leaseholds and leasehold tenure. The second objective is to provide for the continued vestment of land in the president and alienation of land by the president. The other objective is to provide for the statutory recognition and continuation of customary tenure. To provide for the conversion of customary tenure into leasehold, and to establish a land development fund and a lands tribunal. So from the principles given in the Constitution, we can see there is to some extent a link from what the Constitution provides for and what the Act provides for. Part 1 of the Act, it's okay, we can go on the next slide. Part 1 of the Act, just look at the title of the Act itself, which is the Lands Act of 1995, but also the definitions, the different terms, terminologies that have been used in the Act. So we won't dwell much on that. We go on Part 2, just to mention that we've been guided that the review of the Act is mainly going to be based on Part 2 of the Act. So part 3 and part 4, they are not focusing on that. I stand to be corrected, but that is the guidance that we've been given. So under part 2, that is where you find a lot of provisions on how land is to be administered in the country. So I'm going to look at some of these provisions. The issue of vestment of land in the president is under this part, where it states that all land in Zambia shall be vested in the president for and on behalf of the people of Zambia. However, that the president has given delegated powers to the Ministry of Lands, where the Commission of Land sits, and also the Ministry of Lands has got its agents, the councils who help also in administering land. So that is on investment of land. It gives powers for land to be vested in the president. And then there's also a provision on conditions of alienation of land. So it gives a guide on how land should be alienated to Zambians and non-Zambians. If you look at the provisions in detail on alienation of land to non-Zambians, there are guidelines there on how a non-Zambian can get a piece of land. It can be allocated if that person or an institution is an investor. If a person has stayed in the country for 10 years, there are all these conditions that have to be followed for one to be alienated land if he or she is non-Zambian. Recognition and continuation of customary holdings as provided for in the Constitution. The Act also provides for this, where customary holding or customary tenure continues, and like stated earlier on, that most of the land in Zambia is under customary tenure. We don't know how much land is under customary tenure now, but initially the initial percent of land is under state, while 94 is under customary land. So we have a lot of land under customary tenure, and that's how come most of the investment and displacements are happening under customary tenure, because that is where most of the land is. However, that because of the under customary tenure has been converted to state land, and we should expect that a customary tenure customary land has reduced from the official 94% to, I don't know, until we have the land audit outcomes. The other provision is the conversion of customary tenure into leasehold tenure. The Act provides for this. This also contributed to the belief that customary tenure is second to state land because of this provision, but also the fact that customary tenure is not documented. It has resulted in people and interested parties to convert land from customary to state land. The people prefer to have land be converted to state land, again contributing to the fact that this is reducing on customary tenure. As we are thinking about this, I think it's important to also further our thoughts to the fact that customary land is land which gives us identity. It's land or it's tenure that protects our culture and beliefs. So in the process of converting most of this land to state land, we are actually doing away with our culture and beliefs. I think we have a lot of examples that we can give, like those that are within Lusand, within Zambia. You know, the issue that chiefdom converted to state land, and now it's just a chiefdom by name, but mostly they do not have land, and in that way they've lost out on their cultural identities. There is also a provision on prohibiting of unauthorized occupation of land. We have a lot of illegal settlements in the country where people just go around and find vacant land and open land, and they think that that is their land. However, that is not allowed in the Lands Act of 1995. Cases where, due to politics, others have allocated land to unsuspecting people, and this has been a challenge where community members or citizens have felt constructed and structures only for them to be demolished after being much. Currently, they received a complaint from some citizens in Lusaka who were allocated piece of land by. The next slide, please. Thank you. The other provision is alienation of land to any Zambian. So our law is non-discriminating. Any Zambian has got a right to own land. So on this provision, it's good that there is no discrimination, because we have a lot of challenges or concerns around women, youths, persons with disability. It doesn't matter. For our law provides that any Zambian. So on this one, we are good. The only challenge that comes in is that the mechanisms and standards of ensuring that every Zambian, regardless of their gender, regardless of their status, they can own land. Otherwise, the Act is very accommodating on that. It's very considerate. Allocation of land to non-Zambian with conditions like I mentioned. Our law allows for non-Zambians to own land in Zambia for 99 years. And I think I need, up to now, I would want to learn from those that have joined us from other countries. If such a provision in law exists in other countries, I would want to learn an example where land is allocated to foreigners, for lack of a better term, but it's at the same conditions with those of the Zambians. And then there's also the 10-year period, which is 99 years. So that is state land, because customary land is not documented. So when you own land under customary, it's forever. Of course, it's got its own conditions, but under state land, there's a period which is 99 years. And then after that, the land is going to be, it will go back to the government. You need to apply again for the land to revert back to you, or you lose it depending on the development. There are conditions there. If you have not used the land accordingly, or there are other concerns that have been raised, then the land will be repossessed. Otherwise, you can apply and you continue owning it. There's also no sale or transfer of land without consent from the president. This is a provision which citizens do not know. They transact in land and they don't know that they're supposed to get consent. They're supposed to pay a certain amount to the government from the sale of land. The president has to consult chiefs before alienating land in customary areas and must consider the local customary land in the area, but should not be in conflict with this act. So this provision guides that the president, before alienating land in a chiefdom or in a council, in fact, in a district council area, there is need that there is this consultation that happens. However, working with Zambia Land Alliance and different stakeholders on the ground, there have been complaints, a lot of complaints from the chiefs themselves, but also from their subjects, including the members of the Chiefs Council and village head persons who complained that the chiefs not consulted. The only time that the chiefs come into the equation or come to know about this is when, especially when investors go to them to seek their signatures or to get the consent letter so that the land is converted to state land. That's when the chief come to know that there is this alienation which has happened. So the issue of consultation is very, very serious on the ground, but there is this provision. So we need to now look at how, the next parts, which is part 3 and part 4, they look at the land development fund. However, we're not going to look at this because I'm focusing on part 2, which is where the review is based. Part 4 is on the Lands Tribunal. Just to mention that the Lands Tribunal, already there is a Lands Tribunal Act which is in existence, and we're sure after revising this this law, the Lands Tribunal part is going to be removed from the Act. So we can go on the impact now. So I just looked at some of the provisions and thought of sharing some of the impact of the current law, the way it is in its current form and how it has impacted on the citizens and their land rights. So the first thing first, when we go back to the principles in the Constitution, we have observed that to some extent, there is non-adherence to some of the principles of land policy as provided for in the Constitution. Sustainable land use is one of them. Of course, we appreciate that we need to develop our land, and most of the development is coming through because of investment. But most of our land has been prioritized for investment, especially in the extractive industry. So the mining ministry or the mines ministry, they've got their own plans. They have what they want to do and achieve. But the observation is that we are not using land sustainably because we want to allow for every land to be a mine, every land maybe to be under investment, different investment, but forgetting that we need this land today and for tomorrow. We are prioritizing mining as a country to other sectors and other rights. Talk about food rights, talk about rights to water. We are forgetting about that, but most of the land is going for mining. There's provision on the effective and efficient settlement of land dispute, which is supposed to be provided for with the establishment of the Lands Tribunal. There is a challenge there because the Lands Tribunal is there, yes. However, that the sessions or the meetings that the Lands Tribunal have around the country, they are very minimal. And I think by last year, the tribunal had not sat for 2 years because I'm not sure if it's the chairpersons and maybe the panelists had not been selected and all that. Meantime, we have a lot of land disputes around the country, and the Lands Tribunal was set up to reduce the workload on the High Court and the other court system. However, that this has not helped out. And also that the Lands Tribunal is supposed to help citizens access justice cheaply. However, because of time, this is not happening. And most of the affected people decide to take cases to the High Court. But you know, with the High Court, you need to have lawyers, and it's very expensive. And if you do not have these lawyers, then it's going to be a challenge for you. You might end up losing your land and your rights to your piece of land. The provision on the river frontages, islands and lake shores to be accessible to the public, it's another challenge we've seen. I think I can give an example of places like Siavonga, like Samfia, where these pieces of land have been fenced off. We've got structures which have been erected, like lodges, hotels, and a mere citizen, a person like me, cannot access until I go through, maybe I pay something for me to have access to these places. But also we are forgetting about the ecologically sensitive and cultural areas because mainly of investment. We just heard yesterday about the Chinyunyu case where it's been given to a Chinese investor and all. So the other principle in the Constitution, which is not being adhered to, is investment benefiting the local communities. We have got a lot of cases where community members have been displaced because of investment. and they haven't gotten any benefits. The nearest one is those community members that were affected by the M-phase in Lusaka. That was about 9 years ago, which is 10 years ago because it was way back in 2015. This is 2025, and those community members are still languishing 10 years later on. And then we've got plans for land use to be done in a consultative and participatory manner. I think I labored to explain on this one as we were looking at the principles. Can we go on the next slide? So impact continues. If we look at the objectives of the Lands Act, to some extent, all the objectives have been achieved. If you go back to the objectives, talking about the Act, looking at leasehold tenure and also continuation of customary land, recognizing customary land. So those objectives have been achieved to some extent and at face value they have. But if we go into the details of these objectives and how the objectives were supposed to be achieved, that's where we find a lot of challenges, like tenure insecurity on customary land. So the law and the constitution recognizes the importance of security, the importance of customary land. However, that there is insecurity, and there are cases where thousands of people under customary land have been displaced, still fighting for their compensation. We can give a lot of cases. ZLA is working in different areas. We have a case right now in Northwestern Province where one of the mines there has extended its mine, and they've gotten more than 10,000 hectares of land, affecting 270 community members who have been displaced. We've also got cases in Central Province to do with manganese now, including Luapula. We've got cases in Southern Province, in Sinazongwe. We've got cases in Eastern Province. So we have all these cases and they are all on customary tenure. So customary land continues to be recognized, but it is very insecure. Even nearby here, we've got these cases in the chiefdom surrounding Lusaka. Alienation of land to non-Zambians, especially for investment, has resulted in displacement of people. We have cases that we've pointed out to, and the only compensation, Bridget talked about compensation issues. The only compensation that these people receive is the disturbance and then the development on the land, that is all. The other land that they have, they are not paid for because they have not developed it, but land has got value. Just bare land is of high value. However, because they are citizens, they don't know their rights, some of them, and they cannot demand for what belongs to them. So the powers that be take advantage of people. And if you look at the compensation that they are getting, it's not something that anyone can be happy about. So we really need to look into issues of compensation as the act is being reviewed, because people deserve more than what they are getting. Displacement of people without proper consultation. Consultation is very, very cardinal, but we've seen that this is not being followed. The Constitution provides for it, that there should be consultation. However, we do not see this. During the development of the National Lands Policy, the free, prior, and informed consent was recommended. It was submitted. And I remember in the 2019 draft lands policy, this concept was there. However, when it came to the adoption in 2021, everything was taken out. However, that there is need for people to be consulted because they are the ones that are sitting on the land and they are the ones that are affected when displacement is imminent. So there is need. The challenge that comes about is when they are consulting, they take it that since the chief represents the subjects, if he's consulted, then it's okay. But the community members themselves, the citizens themselves, they want to be consulted because they are the ones that are affected and they're the ones that are on the ground. The one-sided conversion resulting in depletion of customary land, this is a serious concern, especially with the chiefs, but also as citizens, because like I mentioned earlier on, anyone, even non-Zambians, can own land under leasehold. But when it comes to customary land, this is land that identifies citizens, identifies our customs and culture. And if we continue with the conversion of customary tenure, it means if we continue with the conversion, then it means that we are losing out on customary land, and we are not going to have chiefs because there is not going to be a chief without land. A chief is there because of the land, and the people follow the chiefdoms because there is land where they're going to settle. No regulation to administer customary land. I mentioned on this one, I talked about it, that the Constitution recognizes customary land, but there is no law that helps to administer land. So there is need that we should have a law. Not sure whether we're going to have a standalone law or it should be embedded in the act now, which is under review. But if it's going to be embedded, then there is need that this law should be in detail, because what we have now, it's just about recognition and identifying the chiefs that they are custodians, and that's it. But when it comes to state land, there are a lot of details on how it should be administered, the processes and systems. So there's need that we look into that. A 10-year period and size, Mr. Msole touched on this one. The National Land Policy provides for regulating access and limiting the extent and tenure. So there is that provision, but how is it going to be done? Because in Zambia, anyone can own as many pieces of land as they want and as many hectares as they want. However, that will end up having a situation where the rich and those that are capable are going to own half of the country or even 75% of the country. And then us, the poor, will be in the 25% that is remaining, and we'll start fighting over that. Investment of land in the present risk, there is a risk, but also a fear that maybe this power might be abused. For now, we haven't seen, I think for me, I haven't seen maybe a case or an example where this provision has been abused, but I'm sure those that have got cases we can share. The fear is that we might have a person in office who is going to abuse this power and use it to disadvantage the people of Zambia. So that's why citizens and stakeholders are recommending that this should be, the land should be vested maybe in the people and then held by the president on behalf of the Zambians. The next slide, please. Access to justice is a challenge, even in the face of the Lands Tribunal. I explained on that one. And then women land rights are still a challenge. So the Lands Act does not discriminate. But from the time that it was adopted, up to the time that the policy was enacted, we had seen a lot of challenges, women owning land, whether state or customary, because under customary, there are beliefs and cultures that we believe in which disadvantage women. When the lands policy came in, providing for 50% allocation, at least we are seeing some of our traditional leaders coming on board to ensure that women have got land rights, and we've got champions around. One of them is Chief Chamuka in Chisamba district here. So chiefs are coming on board, but there is a lot that needs to be done, because even under state land, we haven't seen the standard mechanism on how this is going to be achieved from the time that the land policy was adopted in 2021. And I think my colleagues were looking at some research. We cannot, from 2021 up to maybe last year, we cannot positively or effectively say that the country has achieved a 50% because we are yet to put in place a standard mechanism to ensure 50% land allocation goes to women. And then alleged non-consultation of chiefs when land is being alienated for investment. I labored on that one. And then also the issue on surface and subsurface rights. This is a very hot issue, especially on the ground. Stakeholders or citizens are asking why Zambians only have a right to land which is above, but when it comes to rights underground, these rights have been given to the president under the Mines and Minerals Act, I'm sure. So the concern is that if this land belongs to me, and if it's under state lands, I also have a title deed. Why should it be that I only have surface rights? So people want to own the subsurface rights or the underground rights so that they're also, they become partners to investment because that is their land. So due to the fact that citizens only have surface rights, that is where we have cases where investors displace people. They take them somewhere very far away from the land, the fertile land, away from economic and social rights, and then take them somewhere else because they do not have underground rights. So this is a challenge and it's a concern. If we can only have a law that is going to also include the subsurface rights to the people, I think it will make Zambians very rich because our country has got a lot of minerals. We go on the next slide. Oh, is that the last slide, Emanuela, or you jumped one? Okay,
It looks
thank
like
you so
that's
much. So,
yeah, it looks like that's the
okay.
end.
Okay, thank you so much. So I was just looking at the Constitution and its principles of land policy, and then went into the Lands Act itself, which is under review, looking at some of the provisions under there. But then again, I went further to look at the impact of this act in its current form, just to put context to what the act provides for and how the act is in terms of status on the ground concerning our land administration. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Jacinta. That was a very comprehensive review and understanding of what the current law contains and how it's currently impacting on different groups, especially vulnerable groups. So that is very much appreciated. There are some questions for both you and Mr. Msole in the chat and in the Q&A. But perhaps just before we go into that, I'd just like to start with you, Jacinta, just to understand or just to ask you to elaborate a bit more on when we talk about women not having as much access. You're saying you and your colleagues have been trying to review, trying to assess. What would you say are the barriers that are causing this, that continue, apart from, of course, maybe the laws not being effective, but because you work with communities, what has been your observation specifically? What is it that is preventing more women from accessing land?
Thank you so much. Women, to some extent, when we talk about access, I think access could be a little bit easy because when we talk about access, it's just finding land. I'll give an example of those women in the communities or small-scale farmers. So if you do not have a land, you can access it, of course, through maybe your family members. You can also rent a piece of land. You can also maybe go to the chief and get this piece of land. But the challenges on the ground, the first thing is that we still need to reach out to a lot of women and sensitize them on their rights on land. But as we are doing that, especially under customary land, there is need that we harmonize the rights as well as look at the culture and beliefs and norms that exist in that chiefdom. Only can we do a better job, because in as much as we appreciate that we've got these rights that are enshrined in the law, there is need to consider the norms in that area. Or else we're going to bring disputes. These are issues that we cannot run away from. There are also traditional leaders that are ready to give a woman a piece of land, but they'll request that you come with your husband if you are married. So you are going to have a piece of land as long as the traditional leader knows that your husband has said yes. The explanation that was given to us was that we do not want to bring confusion or a dispute between you and your husband, that you went and got a piece of land without your husband knowing. So the man is still there to confirm or define this woman for them to get a piece of land. But just to mention that Zambia Land Alliance and other institutions like MEDIM, there is People's Process, there is also Habitat for Humanity Zambia. Through different projects, they've tried to ensure that women have their rights protected through customary land holding certificates, which are given under traditional land. And then the other challenge is about women accessing land, maybe under state land, but they do not have the financial capacity to develop. So when they have this piece of land, they need, first of all, to pay the consideration fees that are needed. I think I can give myself as an example. When I tried to access a piece of land, I was supposed to pay an amount which I could not afford within that period of time, and I had to sweat for me to find that. Even when I was working, now imagine for a person who is in a worse situation than myself and what they go through. So they can have that piece of land, but because they cannot afford to pay the consideration fees that are being asked for by the council, they end up reselling that one, and then they get just a top-up amount. So that piece of land will go to a man, and the only thing that they'll remain with is maybe a little bit of cash without that piece of land. But they also do not have financial capacity to develop, which the council is going to repossess the piece of land. So it's a 50-50 situation, but we still need to reach out to a lot of women. Yeah.
Okay, so is this something that stakeholders are discussing in terms of how then do they overcome those barriers that are hindering women, and how does the law also respond to that reality on the ground? Is this something that has been discussed in your consultations and engagements? Okay, Mr.
Yes,
Msole had his hand up.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues. Maybe I thought I should add to the Jacinta's response to the issue of women land rights. According to the data that was shared by the Ministry of Lands last year, when we were making submissions in the budget for the Ministry of Lands, as at last year or the other year, 2023, women ownership of land stood at 33% out of the allowed 50% of ownership or allocation of land to women. Now that shows you how serious our problem is. Okay, we have a policy that allows us to allocate 50% of all land to women, and on the ground we are only struggling around the 33% thereabout. Now, Jacinta has given some of the barriers, especially from customary land. So basically, we have cultural, social barriers, and those norms, where even women themselves need to be convinced that they can acquire land and own it in their name, because they have been schooled and cultured to believe that land is for men, and they can only use their husband's land, their uncle's land, their brother's land, so forth. So we need a lot of sensitivity in that area. But there are also economic barriers, which the center has hinted on, where the amounts of money required, most women may not be able to afford in order to put up the development that's required. So that's a challenge. But apart from that, there are systems as well. The manner in which this land is advertised, especially state land, it's advertised in the print media. Now, not everyone has access to the media in order to see where land is being advertised. Unless the systems have changed, there was a requirement of producing a bank statement to prove that you have the economic capacity or financial capacity to develop this land. And so you are already putting ownership of a bank account as a barrier for women. So I think these are issues that we need to dig into. So we can put the 50% as affirmative action, which is well and good, but we need to deal with the underlying factors, the underlying barriers which hinder women from accessing the land, not accessing but owning land. So like Jacinta mentioned, access to land in Zambia is not a very big issue because normally women use access land through their husbands, their brothers, their uncles, or even renting from their neighbors. But ownership and control is the real issue because that's where the land needs to be in their name so that they can decide whether to sell it, whether to rent it out, whether to use it for whatever crop of their choice. That is the big issue that we have. I thought I should add to Jacinta's response to that question.
Okay. So my follow-up question then was, since our discussion is around how then do we tackle this, and I see that there is a comment also speaking to this from Samantha here, I believe. She's also echoing the same sentiments to say it's almost like we're just making a token out of it. It's just there on paper, but in real life, women still continue to face this inequality and these barriers. So as we are looking at this review process, what are the submissions around this issue? How then our stakeholders, what are stakeholders' views on this? What are they saying about how this access can be improved? Have the relevant stakeholders been engaged at that level? You did mention before, I think both you and Jacinta did mention that sometimes these engagements they're not very representative. They don't actually have those people whose voices need to be heard of the most. And when we talk about customary land, these are in rural areas. So to what extent or how have these engagement or consultations been tailored to ensure that these voices are actually heard and their submissions are put into consideration? Barriers which maybe somebody who's lived their whole life in the urban area doesn't know are faced by women or just vulnerable groups or people in rural areas. In your experience, what has been this consultation process like, and what submissions have come up?
All right, thank you so much, Manuela, for that question. I think what we need to do and what we are doing at Zambia Land Alliance is that we are going beyond the policy. And so, for example, under customary land, there are areas where we are working with chiefdoms to enhance women's land rights. Now, what we are doing is that we go into the chiefdom and we share the policy provisions, basically explaining these are the provisions of the policy. When it comes to the land allocation for women, we are sensitizing the chiefdoms and the chiefs' councils about 50% allocation of all land to women. And once they buy into it, we ensure that that provision is included in their bylaws. Every chiefdom has bylaws, which are basically the rules that govern the way in which natural resources are governed or are administered, including land. So the 50% allocation of land to women has been included in the bylaws of the chiefdom to ensure that when there is land available, that land should actually be allocated, 50% of it should be allocated to women, 20% to the youth, and the rest can be competed for. Unfortunately, we have limited reach. So we are not in all the districts, but in areas where we have projects, such as Southern Province, Central Province, Eastern Province, we have ensured that the chiefdom bylaws include the provisions of the policy. And we think that if we had other stakeholders lobbying for the same, to ensure that the policy provisions are incorporated in the local laws or bylaws, I'm sure we will be able to make progress. When it comes to state land, we need to ensure that the issues that I explained, these barriers, both economic barriers, system barriers, are also addressed by the laws and the administrative system. For example, when we place that affirmative action, the affirmative action should go as far as talking about fees. For example, if as a man I'm supposed to pay 5,000 as a fees, women should be given reduced fees. They may not scrap off the fees, but they should reduce, because that's when the affirmative action becomes meaningful. Because otherwise, what we give away by means of that percentage, we take back by means of the barriers that we set up. So we need to deal with the financial, the economic barriers. We need to deal with the other system barriers, the requirements, and all of that, so that the affirmative action becomes meaningful. I think that's my contribution. Maybe Jacinta has her hand up. I think she wants to contribute. Over to you, Jacinta.
Thank you, Mr. Msole. I just wanted to point out that we also need to question now, going forward, the Ministry of Lands in terms of its implementation plan of the National Lands Policy, because there is planned for to ensure that the mechanisms, the standard mechanisms are developed to ensure that the 50% for women and 20% for youths is implemented. So we need to follow up. They planned for it, but I don't know. I'm not working for Ministry of Lands. Maybe if they were here, they would have explained to what extent we've moved on implementation of this plan, but also sensitization of the citizens. Like Mr. Msole has mentioned, Zambia Land Alliance and the CSOs on this webinar, we can only reach out to a certain extent, but this is also a duty of the government, because this is what is in the policy, and also they developed an implementation plan of the policy, which they have not implemented. That is why we even have the 30% outcome or result in the report that Mr. Msole was talking about. So I think we also need to question why they have not implemented what is in the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you both. I think it's encouraging to hear that, there's already thought around real implementation and real, having these whatever laws or changes that will come about actually come alive and actually make a difference in people's lives. So I'll go now into the Q&A. We have a question here from Dr. Samuel directed to you, Mr. Msole. The question is, it would be nice to hear how responsive the chiefs are towards the review of the Lands Act, which is based on the recommendations of the National Land Policy, for which the majority rejected. So Dr. Samuel is looking to hear from you, Mr. Msole, what has been the reaction or response from the chiefs towards this review process? Going by the fact that it's based on the recommendations of the National Land Policy, which majority of them rejected.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Mabike, for that question. And I think I can confidently say that initially the chiefs were trying to resist getting involved with the Lands Act, because it was based on the policy that they rejected. But I think we've done a good job sensitizing those that we've been able to reach. Basically, we told them, you see, you had an opportunity to influence the land policy. You chose to walk out. And when you walked out, did the process stop? It did not stop. It went ahead. I personally gave them an example that in 1996, there were elections, national elections, general elections. One of the party, the previous ruling party, decided to boycott those elections, the UNIP. That was the death of UNIP. Since that time, UNIP has actually been left behind. So I gave this example to them. You have an opportunity to participate in this process. Yes, you may have been displeased with the outcome of the policy. You abandoned it, but the policy is now official, and you are subject to it. So I think those that have been able to engage are willing to move forward, and not to lose out for the second time. So the chiefs in Central Province, in Northwestern Province, in Luapula Province, these that have engaged have been cooperative. They have since made their submissions, which we hope that the provincial chiefdom officers will submit to the ministry. But if the ministry goes back to the same provinces, I'm sure they'll be able to receive submissions, because we have prepared the ground for the ministry. It should be much, much easier to engage, because when the ministry engages them, they will not be hearing those things for the first time, because we have already done a lot of groundwork. Now, I don't know how the chiefs that we have not reached, how they'll respond to this. But hopefully, because we have also engaged the lands committee for the chiefs, House of Chiefs, who I think would have influence. I hope that they'll be able to respond positively. I'm confident of that.
Okay.
But chiefs can be unpredictable. Like some presidents are in the neighborhood across the ocean, they can be unpredictable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Msole. I saw Jacinta's hand up. We do have a couple more questions, so I'll just ask our panelists to just give us as concise as possible a response, so that we can get through all the questions and submissions, and just in case there are some people that would like to be allowed to speak, so that I can get to the point where I can unmute them. Okay, right into the next question. Jacinta, there's a question for you from Zorai. It says, since customary tenure is largely undocumented, how are Zambian courts resolving disputes for land which is not documented in the event that holders of customary tenure have a land dispute? Jacinta, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think I'll request some of my colleagues within those that are on the platform to respond to that. But we have a lot of cases, and I think I'll give one of the cases that was resolved in court. That was in Serenge. That was in Serenge under Chief Muchinda, where community members lost land due to farming investment, and that case was taken to court because they questioned, I think they questioned the legality of the title that was given. So to some extent, it depends on the case and the documents available. The case can be taken to court, and in that case, I think Mr. Msole, Bridget, can give more details where I'll miss it. The community members, the court in Kawe, that is the High Court, resolved that the land should be given back to the community because I think it had to do with the legality of the title. And the other cases that we have now, again, when land is given from customary land, you need to have a consent letter from the chief. So we also have issues somewhere in Impika, somewhere in Serenge, where land has been put on title, but the chiefs are questioning the legality, how that land was put on title when they didn't sign. They've been disputing the consent letters and all. So to some extent, there are cases which are resolved within the chiefdom, but cases of investment and others, they reach up to the high courts. But I'll need those that are vested well with law to explain more. Thank you.
Perhaps I can come in on this one as well, Jacinta. Just to mention that SAUC did support a case just relating to your questions, all right. I'm just sharing a link now in the chat box that takes you to just the case profile on this. And yeah, this case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It did involve the conversion, the illegal conversion of customary land, and the community, yes, you were right, Jacinta, from Serenja in that case did get justice. And so they're currently at the stage where the damages are being assessed. So the courts, I think, are being responsive. Of course, there is a lot more that can be done in that vein. There is another case still pending around communal rights that always proves to be a challenge, a recognition of communal rights as it relates to customary land, which is actually another thing that I think I would have wanted to say, have there been submissions around how will communal rights be handled, you know, in terms of the new Lands Act, because there are a lot of informal rights that attach to customary land that are not recognizable and not easy to enforce. So again, this is, I think, another important discussion around the submissions or around the amendments that need to be taken into account. And I don't know, my colleagues from the Zambia Land Alliance, whether you've received any submissions around how communal rights or informal rights that attach to customary land will be treated, especially as they relate to compensation, because sometimes the compensation will be taking into account individual rights. And yes, we know culturally in I think across the region that there's a lot of communal rights that we live communally, so there are a lot of communal rights that attach to land. So I hope that helps answer your questions, Aurora, in terms of court cases and the like. There are a few other cases that are still pending, and all of those also can be found on the ones that we are supporting as SAUC can be found on the SAUC website. But as Jacinta mentioned, Zambia Land Alliance is also involved in a couple of other cases around the country. Just to take again a quick question here, another question from Zorarai, perhaps because we've taken one from Zorarai, can I ask that we just go to one of these other questions here? And we could come back to your question, your second question, Zorarai. Conversion of customary land to statutory land is a one-way traffic, which if the trend continues as it is now, the entire country may end up in a one tenure system. Can the law call for reconversion back to customary land if land is not used for the intended lease? This question hasn't been directed at any specific panelists, but colleagues, either one of you is free to respond to that question.
Thank you so much. I think that question and that proposal is what we've been grappling with as Zambia Land Alliance. During the policy development process, we wanted that provision to be in the policy because of the same concern that, okay, at independence, we were at 94% customary, 6% state, and now we are talking about roughly 80% customary, 20% state. If we continued in this trajectory, there might be no customary land to talk about, even if the Constitution recognizes it. And so we've actually been advocating for a reverse process, like he suggested. If the intended purpose for conversion is not being achieved, why can't we have a reverse process? If the lease period elapses, why can't we have a reverse process? So far, that has not been taken up by government, and we hope that we'll keep on pushing that. Even in this amendment process, the chiefs are asking for it, and we are pushing for it. We see what the consensus is. But so far, from the past, we haven't been successful with that that request or that demand.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Boxton, who is also just acknowledging that Malawi and Zambia are like sister countries. So his question is, the issue of land rights is always compromised by political influence and corruption. What strategy do CSOs put in place in order to end or reduce the number of people infringed by authorities or other enforcers in Zambia? So it's a question around strategies by CSOs as it relates to the influence of politics and corruption. It's also not been directed to any specific speaker.
Let me go.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's a real corruption in land administration is a real issue, and especially when it is people that are politically connected or inclined, that seems to be a big problem. So Zambia Land Alliance, working with the other partners, including Transparency International Zambia, are actually coming up with the programs such as the land in, corruption in land and the other programs to sensitize members of, first of all, who has the mandate to administer land. Because you find that politically connected people want to start issuing land or allocating land. You know, that is wrong. It must be reported because that's corruption. We sensitize, but we also encourage community members and all stakeholders to monitor land allocation so that we are able to hold duty bearers to account, including our chiefs. We need to question them when we see that there's no transparency, there's no explanation on what is happening, there's suspicion around land administration. So it is something that we are doing with different stakeholders. And we hope that with time we'll be able to beat this giant, but it's a real serious challenge.
Mr. Msolebe, perhaps a follow-up on that. Would you say that people in these communities, trust the accountability systems? Do they trust that if they go to, I don't know, the police station or something, do they trust that these accountability systems or reporting systems will really result into anything? From your observation working in the communities, do they even know where they should go if they observe this kind of thing or if they see this kind of thing happening, and what has been their experience when they do approach those what should be enforcers, I guess?
Emanuela, it's interesting that you're asking that question. I'm coming from a radio station where I was having bad internet connection, where someone called and said there was an illegality in his land, went to report to the police station. The police officer says, so boss, it's you. And then that was the end of the case. And now the caller was saying, what should I do? Can I report to you because the police are not helping? So I think there is a trust deficit with the system. First of all, our chiefs, by nature, by our culture, are not accountable. When you ask questions, they feel like you are attacking them, that disrespecting them, and we need to change this culture. When you have a duty, you need to be accountable. So we need to be able to hold our chiefs accountable. We need to be able to hold our political leaders, civic leaders, and political leaders accountable. Sometimes they also behave like their chiefs. They don't want to be questioned, but we need to question them. So there is actually a trust deficit. And that's how come they find it easier to approach civil society organizations. We have a lot of complaints coming our way instead of going to the police because they feel that they can trust us. When the chiefs are not happy with government position on the law, they come to us. They are happy to engage us, not to engage government, because of the same trust deficit that is there. So I think we need to work on building trust in the systems, but systems also need to prove that they are trustworthy and that they are objective and efficient in delivering on their mandates for them to earn the trust of the people.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Msole. We are going into the dying minutes of our session today. I think it's been quite informative for everyone. I hope that we've all been able to take away, important issues and to see also. I think, Mr. Msole, as you wind up as I invite you to wind up, I will ask you to also let us know, all of us on this call, how can we contribute to these submissions? What, maybe people are only now, hearing that there is even a review process. So at the end, I will invite you to let us know how is it that an ordinary person can be involved in these submissions, because they should be involved. Participation is very important from the get-go, rather than trying to resolve things after the fact. So there were some other questions in the Q&A, and thank you, colleagues from Zambia Land Alliance are attending to those questions by typing responses to them there. Perhaps one other question that is in the chat box, Mr. Msole, is, are there any mechanisms that have been put in place in chiefdoms to ensure that these processes are being followed? Because most of the times policies are there, but they are rarely followed. So in just 1 minute, Mr. Msole, I'll invite you to answer that question.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have systems, especially under customary land, because it's administered according to cultural norms, values, and systems. We hope that enacting the law, customary land law that Jacinta talked about, will provide those systems so that the issues we are talking about and the provisions of the policy will be incorporated in that law, and it are applied to all the chiefdoms. Currently, no, there are no systems for customary land.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me see if I can get to perhaps the very last question here that has not been responded to. I understand Zambia is undergoing legal reform. Does the Zambia, he's basically asking where there's been violation of human rights through mass displacements to pave way for mining and business activities. I think this is the question that you had started to answer before you dropped off, Mr. Msole. How is the legal framework and policy framework dealing with these issues of displacements by mining and other business activities?
Thank you so much. I think one of the challenges that we don't have a law that governs compensation for people that are displaced. We have a policy, national resettlement policy, which has just been revised. We haven't seen the revised copy. Our push and our demand is that we need to have a law which will operationalize that policy, so that people that are affected by investment who are displaced should be resettled and compensated. But we need a law to do that. Currently, we only have a policy which is unmonitored, which is not enforced in most cases, because it is left to the investors to enforce that law, and it doesn't work. So we have a challenge, and we hope we continue to push that we have a law on the resettlement compensation.
Okay, thank you all very much for joining us today. In these last few minutes, I will just invite Mr. Msole to wind up and tell us how it is that an ordinary person can be involved in this review process. What are the next steps? What should be anticipated in the weeks or months to come in terms of how this review process will unfold? If you're able to, Mr. Msole, that will be, I think, very helpful for everyone on this call that would like to follow this process and perhaps make submissions. And after that, we will close off. So in 1 minute, Mr. Msole, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. That's a hard talk for me to do in 1 minute, but let me try. Okay. Actually, engagements and consultations are ongoing. The Ministry of Lands is right now busy consulting stakeholders in different places. I think the last consultation, I can't remember whether it was in Sparta or Livingstone, but that was last consultation. I'm reliably informed there will be one big consultation that will take place in Lusaka. So once that dates and venues and the details are out, I'm sure Dr. Mabike is on this call. Once that information is out, we will publicize it and invite all of you that are part of this meeting, especially those that are in Zambia. Please find time to attend. It's an in-person meeting, but it's very important that you all, using the questions that you've raised here, the issues that you've raised and the concerns that you've raised, you have enough ammunition to be able to come and make your submission. The thing is, government has not provided a template like a draft that this is what we want. No, they've just said, okay, that's the Lands Act. Look at it and tell us what you want changed, what you want removed, what you want added. So it's now up to us. Having analyzed it the way we have done, it's now our mandate to ensure that we can make our contributions so that after the process has been finalized, we will now compare the draft that government will develop with our submissions. I'm hoping that will be such a validation process to ensure that our voices are heard, to ensure that our submissions will be contained in the amended Lands Act. Otherwise, thank you all for making time to attend this. We are very, very grateful. Let's continue to work together to ensure that we contribute to the laws that for administering the land in our country. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you for joining. Bye.
Thank you, Sal, for facilitating this. We are grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bridget, thank you so much. Hi, Bridget, can you hear me?